I would like you to think about the automobile industry. Cars changed the way people lived and influenced international business and worldwide economies in ways we couldn't have imagined. There is no doubt that the automobile industry revolutionized industrial production. However, if you compare the first ever made mass-produced car in history, the Ford Model T, with the Tesla Model S, you notice that cars today are not only faster, but they are also more secure and sustainable. Concerns about people's safety and sustainability increase the regulation and industry common standards. Today, the automobile industry is highly regulated. There is no doubt or debate on whether automobile manufacturers need to respect and implement a minimum set of security measures into their cars. It is a given for all industry and consumers that cars need to have belts, airbags, headrests, ABS brakes, etc. What now seems obvious for us required decades for the automobile industry to conceive and develop. We can use this example of the automobile industry to better understand the current stage of AI development. Roughly speaking, this is the Model T era of AI. We are witnessing the first stage of its development and impact on the world. Like Ford's Model T lacks of security and safety measures for today's standards, tomorrow we will look at the current stage of AI development and say the same thing. And that's why and when ethics came into play. We have been discussing ethics for centuries, especially on the philosophy realm. It is difficult to find a consensual and universal definition of ethics, but we can give it a try by defining ethics as a set of moral principles that govern the behaviors or actions of an individual or group of individuals. When we speak about ethics and AI, we abandon the normative ethics to enter into the field of applied ethics. Here, a distinction must be made to differentiate two different concepts: ethics of AI and ethical AI. The first concept, ethics of AI, specifies the moral obligation and duties of AI and its creators and developers, while the ethics of AI relates to the ethical issues related to this technology. Ethical AI concerns the specific problems created by the use of AI. By other words, ethics of AI establish a framework for building an ethical AI. For example, job replacement could be a specific problem created by the use of AI. This concerns the ethical AI concept. On the other hand, the lack of bias mitigation mechanisms concerns the concept of ethics of AI. So, how can we build ethics into AI to establish an ethical AI? To start, we can take into consideration the 8 principles defined by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. These principles relate to the respect and protection of human rights, human well-being, data agency, meaning that AI systems must empower individuals' control over their data, effectiveness, which translates into a specific purpose for AI systems, accountability, awareness of misuse, and competence, which means and aims to create an effective AI system operations. Additionally, we can add 4 other principles that are considered to be crucial. First, AI systems must be designed to be human-centric. Second, although the main goal is to create fully autonomous and conscientious artificial moral agents, humans must retain a certain level of control over AI systems. Third, we should create a redress for AI impact on society, namely a redress to bias. And speaking of bias, the last principle concerns the creation of an evaluation mechanism for bias, one that allows us to identify and mitigate bias on AI systems. If we want to classify all those principles into a few main categories, easy to describe and to remember, We can arrange them into the following manner. First, some features of AI may give rise to ethical issues. To address these issues, AI systems must be more transparent, provide better data security and privacy, and identify who is responsible for AI negative outcomes. Second, some human factors also give rise to ethical issues. Thus, accountability is a required feature. Human ethics standards and human rights laws should also be taken into consideration when building AI systems. Third, AI has the power to produce a negative impact on society, namely through automation and job replacement. As a society, we must conceive AI systems that benefit all society, meaning that we should avoid social exclusion. AI must also be conceived to function in a democratic society that is bound by the rule of law. Fourth, regulatory frameworks should come into play. This can be achieved through legislative and regulatory obligations, self-regulatory instruments, ethic guidelines, or industry standards. Recently, the International Organization for Standardization released a new ISO called Information Technology Artificial Intelligence Overview of Trustworthiness in Artificial Intelligence, which analyzes the factors that can impact the trustworthiness of systems providing or using AI. This is a great example of a requirement to adopt regulatory frameworks at the international level. Consistency and coherency of AI systems can provide a better way to tackle ethical issues related to the use of AI. Finally, to implement these ethical values into AI systems, we can take two main approaches. We can either constrain machines' actions to avoid unethical outcomes, or we can explicitly state what actions are allowed and forbidden. These approaches correspond to the notions of implicit and explicit ethical agents. At the current stage of AI development, the second approach seems more desirable, taking into consideration the human control, the responsibility, and the accountability elements I mentioned before. The main idea here is that AI systems must incorporate the principles of ethics by design.